What if I told you the biggest thing holding your business back isn't the market, your team, or your clients? It's you. Today, we're tackling a hard truth: how to spot when you might be the one slowing your own business down. This is the Contractor Success Forum. I'm Wade Carpenter with Carpenter Company. CPAs, joined by my co-host Stephen Brown with McDaniel Whitley Bonding and Insurance. Stephen, is it possible some contractors may be their own worst enemy?
It is. We could relabel this the Tough Love podcast because the whole objective of this podcast is to let you think, are you holding back your company in some way? Are you the bottleneck that's keeping things from flowing properly? And when I say tough love, it's tough to hear and have self-realization about things that you're doing, maybe to hurt your organization. But I think it's a great topic. And a lot of our listeners need to hear this because the whole thing about bottleneck is if you're doing a construction project, there's something that may be a bottleneck holding up the entire production on the job. It could be some concrete you're waiting for. It could be any number of reasons, but that creates a bottleneck. And the thing about this podcast topic is, are you the bottleneck?
Yeah, for a lot of contractors, I think maybe they're trying to scale or whatever, but they hit up a point where they're just working so hard. And actually, this topic came out of a conversation I had just this week with a contractor that reached back out. I talked to him over 4 years ago. He had scaled up, but he basically hit a wall. And as somebody running my own firm, I understand this is my 25th year on my own. And I realized that at some point you got to be able to get out of the way and let some things get in the way naturally as a business owner. But I was hearing him saying all this stuff like, I'm so worried about these people stealing from me or having this control that he was constraining what his business could do. And so that's why he reached back out to me. Is you remembered how we had talked about what we could do and how we work with them. And so anyway, that's where the conversation started, but it really resonated with me after 25 years. There's things that I do every day that I know I should be able to pass down as I want to grow. These are things that I need in my business. It probably looks different in a construction company, but a lot of the issues are the same.
And it's not just a matter of deciding to delegate more, but the first mention of the 20 ways to help fix the bottleneck is owning it, owning what it is that you may be doing as the owner of the company to be a bottleneck to your organization. That's the hard thing. That expression, you can't see the forest through the trees. A lot of times, like the person you were just talking to that was wound up about someone stealing from them or any matter of items that someone's just hung up and stressed over, creating a bottleneck. You can say someone stealing from me is creating a bottleneck, but what kind of controls are you doing to make sure that you're insured for theft and that you have internal controls in place to keep the theft from happening and that you're willing to delegate that responsibility to someone else and own the fact that it's slowing you down?
A lot of people don't think of this. They just think if I can just work a little harder, and just like any machine, there's only so many parts a machine can put out. And if you're getting to the point where you're bumping up against a wall, maybe it's time to think about how you're doing some things. So we did have 20 thoughts for our listeners today, but before we jumped into that, I was hoping we could talk about some of the things where maybe you could recognize that you are holding things back.
Sure.
This is one I struggle with. Are you the single point of approval on everything? Are you the human speed bump in your organization? So that you got to have sign off from everything from you, or it just doesn't get done. Do you ever see stuff like that?
Absolutely. And the whole point is you've got to say, all right, at some point, we can put systems in place, at least for signing checks to have dual signatures on checks and some other internal controls. and
Mhm.
trusting your reports to tell you what's being paid and what's coming in, and that information being accurate, and then having someone else verify that information as a separate responsibility. Someone who may not be authorized to deposit or withdraw funds. Yeah, it's a huge point. You're a speed bump, and you're slowing something down. The first thing we always see as a human speed bump here is payment, right? And another item of being a human speed bump is just delegating authority to make decisions that need to be made. If you're always doing that for someone who's an employee of yours, how are they ever going to learn how to do it themselves?
Absolutely, and you already hit on a couple of things that that guy was talking about just this week. He's so afraid of that, and you do have to put some controls on things. But the second way I would say, do your jobs pause when you're not available? You're out sick or something like that, or God forbid, take a vacation. Do things come to a grinding halt? If it is, and you're not getting where the cash flow and profitability, maybe some of these things might be resonating. If you're still doing all the job costing, the payroll yourself and paying all the bills and trying to do all the ordering, at some point that becomes too much for one person. And if you're working in the field all day and then come doing paperwork all night, maybe it's time to think about what you're doing.
Yeah, it most certainly does. And just you said, God forbid, take a vacation. You're right. It's like a running joke in our industry, taking vacations. But your family's going to demand it. They demand some quality time with you. And if you don't have the systems in place to be able to take that crazy vacation idea, we might have listeners just hanging up when they hear that. But if you're not planning that, or at least letting your spouse plan this vacation and totally relaxing and being part of that vacation, then your systems aren't in place. Are you going to go on vacation and worry the whole time? If you do go on vacation and worry all the time, you might be a bottleneck.
Carry your sign. I think it all goes back to, do you have enough trust in it? Do you double check each one of your project managers' work or your estimators? I know we were just talking about my Stephen, I guess, was reading my book, and I think the father would have checked that son's bid a little closer, but I get it. I guess there comes a point where, okay, you don't trust them to do it. Maybe they've screwed up in the past and you've tried to train them. If you haven't trained them, maybe you can train them, but there's also a point where the guy was talking about he had worked with this controller for 3 or 4 years, and she just could not grasp the job. She could not do the job, and he felt like he kept going back and forth. But if you're at a point in your business where somebody is holding you back because you have no trust and you don't feel like you can fix it, maybe it's time to find somebody else for that job.
It absolutely is. And you're going to have employees cost you money. We talk about the business side of running construction companies all the time. We talk about how risky it is to be a contractor. But part of the process, one reason you hold on to extra profits and income in your company is to deal with the unknowns, the employee mistakes that cost you money, the jobs that end up costing you money and you make zero money and it costs you money. That has to come from somewhere. But at the same time, if the mistakes are being made and all the right procedures are in place and you just had the wrong employee in the project, then you can just move quickly to correct that. But if it's a situation where it's a learning experience and that person is going to work that much harder to not make that same mistake again, and they actually bring revenue into the company to help offset that loss, that's someone you got to invest in.
Yeah. Does your team come to a pause instead of deciding on something that needed to be done because they're in this analysis paralysis, afraid of making a decision you're not going to agree with? The bottleneck in your business, which is very common for a business owner, but if you're the first one in and the last one out every day, maybe you need to work on having other people do some things. If you're always the go-to firefighter for everything, it's never going to get better unless you figure out how to change it.
Yeah, it's kind of like Jeff Foxworthy. If
You
you
might
do this, you may be a bottleneck. Yeah.
How do we fix this? Why this happens? We know there's fear of loss. If I let it go, it's going to fall apart. A lot of people, you have this control and leadership and you want it to be perfect because your name's on it. It's just, yeah, there's got to be a balance between having it perfect and having it 85%, and then maybe you making sure that other 15% gets covered
Mhm.
somehow. So I do think we need to jump into these 20 ways. I know you've already said the first one, own it first. Any more you want to throw out on that list?
And after you own the fact that you might be the bottleneck, then the second one is loosen your grip on everything. And again, that's easier said than done, isn't it?
Yeah, I guess I just went into that. It's okay, if it's 85% right, then, how can you accept the fact that it may not be 100%, maybe work on training them to get it better next time, but making sure that those major things are covered so that you can move on.
Okay. And then we talked also about really delegating things that need to be done. As your company grows and you take on more work, you have to delegate more.
Yeah, and just some things that you never think about that it's always so close to the best. Delegating for real means one of the biggest things I did was finally turning over payroll. I always did the payroll myself. I obviously could do it and I didn't want anybody else knowing. But when I did that about probably a little over 5 years ago, I could never go on vacation, or I could go on vacation, but I'd still have to do payroll, stuff like that.
You weren't
Delegate.
really on vacation, were you?
Yeah. And so again, thinking about, okay, don't just give them a task, but let them own it.
Okay. And the next one that we just talked about yet again was your name's on that company and it's going to be done right because everything's done as a reflection on your name. Maybe it's a time to think about changing the name and the ownership, selling it to your employees, having a more generic name that represents the whole entity instead of just you. That's a big one. That's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's a big leap, whether it takes that, but it can be very frustrating to a business owner when you feel like your employees are not engaged and you feel like they don't really care and nobody's going to care as much as you do. And I know that's a constant problem, but if you never let go, or I guess said differently, if you hold on too tight, they're not going to be able to take any rope and run with it for you.
Mm.
So are you setting that up for yourself?
Yeah. Next one, hiring and firing folks like it matters. My first impression of that one, Wade, was if you are owner of a construction company and you're hiring and firing people like it matters, you're hiring people because they can take responsibility and you can delegate to them. And you're firing them because they are not taking the responsibility that you give them and accepting the delegation. They're lazy or they're incapable of doing what you need them to do.
Do you have the wrong person in the wrong seat? Does that cause delays? I have a situation with another contractor I was dealing with that held on to somebody. She'd been with them for probably 25 years, but she did not know her job. But she had this knowledge that, okay, we can't get rid of her because she knows so much, just afraid to get rid of her. So they kept paying this high salary and then was causing problems. The way she was doing things caused double work. And so when we sat down and said, let's do this, let's take this off her plate, we saved hours and hours every week. If it's the wrong person in the wrong seat, do you need to make a drastic change? Do you need to fire them? I don't know. I'm not saying you do. Just if you can't change the game, maybe.
We were talking about the owners being the bottleneck. What about other employees like this woman that may have been a bottleneck? Maybe not that she was doing it specifically, but her responsibilities were causing a bottleneck.
In this case, they felt like they couldn't delegate to her. So
Mm.
the owner was holding on to those things. And he could not move past that because they didn't have the right person to be able to do that.
We talked about building systems that don't need you a little bit so you could go on vacation. But before that, you had defined roles, stop the guessing.
That sort of goes with the last one we were just talking about. If it's the wrong person, can you put them in a different seat?
Mhm.
Just tell them this is what your role is. If they can accept it and you giving them enough rope to where they can make their own decisions, or if they're just guessing because they're afraid to do something, they don't know
Mhm.
that they have the authority to do something. Is that holding you back?
We discovered at McDaniel Whitley that regular reviews help our organization run smoothly. If you have a review once a year that's predicated on a raise or not, and the employee feels like they're just getting grilled, that doesn't help anybody. But having a productive review that talks about the flow and the delegation and the issues and the problems, and also how we can help them get through those issues, it's been tremendous.
I'll move on to the next one. Building systems that don't necessarily need you. How do you multiply your time? And I think about my own firm, like, how do I get over the fact that I'm still the only one that is signing a tax return? So I want to make sure it's pretty darn right before it gets to me. I implemented a system where there's 2 checks before it gets to me, whether it's these checks and balances or the big thing now is AI and automation can do some things, some real things for a contractor that take it off your plate. So if you can systematize it and streamline it, AI is really getting to that point in the last year
Mhm.
where it can actually take some things off you. That's what I'm talking about.
Sure. And we've done numerous podcasts on creating systems that work and also on how to use AI for this very specific reason.
I had another one that was sticking in your lane. And what I meant by that is, are you the estimator and the salesman and also working up the bids and taking out the trash and doing those kind of things? If you got little things that could be done by hiring an administrative assistant or something that can do, say, $25 an hour work when you're doing like $500, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up. But if you can stick in your lane and this is what you do best and pass off the stuff that is low rent, that's my thought of what I meant by that.
No, you're exactly right. And the toughest thing to delegate is putting bids together, the control of it. You have estimators that you hire to put bids together, and then you have to check it over and then reconfirm those figures are accurate. And a lot of times, the historical data that you keep on hand and your knowledge of who you're working with as far as unit costs are concerned and the profit and overhead that you put on that, that may have to come to you. But what if it comes to you and someone else as well that has a different set of responsibilities? You just check the numbers, you check the addition, you double check this, you double check that. And then when everyone checks it and signs off of it, then it comes to you to put your final stamp of approval on.
I guess another one I titled it Climb the Ladder. What I was meaning by that is, do you need to get out of the field and stop doing all the work yourself? There's another YouTube channel that you may have seen, Jesse Lane, which I think he has some great messages out there. But he recently put out a episode where somebody called him a fraud because he's running a construction company and can go on vacation. Basically, he has gotten out of swinging a hammer. And that's the point. If you can stop doing that kind of stuff, delegate it and build these systems, you can build a massive organization that runs without you.
Yeah.
Saying no to some jobs. If you say yes to every single job just to keep cash flow or whatever, and you've got more work than you can do, but you still not got no cash in the bank, maybe it's time to slow down and think about what types of jobs, and maybe you should say no more often.
Mhm. Yeah. That's tough. It's tough to say no, especially when something's in your wheelhouse that you need to bid on for any number of reasons, your reputation, your control of the local marketplace, but you just don't have the time to do the project.
That sort of goes hand in hand with the next one was like drawing boundaries. And we're actually going to do an episode on this pretty soon where instead of trying to be everything to everybody, all we take is construction and we got pretty good at it. But just like for a contractor, draw your boundaries. You technically could do that type of job, but should you? Is it really in your wheelhouse? Is it really something that you can make good profit on? I get it. You feel like you're going to lose out, fear of missing out, FOMO, whatever they call it. Put some boundaries up, and you'd be surprised how people respect it.
Okay.
I guess the next one, basically taking a vacation, taking a real break, and maybe you feel like you can't do that, but if you can just get away for a day or two and just think about what you're doing and how you're doing it and how you could change the game, so that you can get to that next level.
Mhm.
That goes in hand with, do you need a coach or advisor or somebody just to, I think you said this is the very first of the podcast was like, you're in the forest for the trees and you can't see any other ways to do things.
And my advice for what it's worth to anyone is you got to take some time for yourself to recharge your batteries, whatever that takes. And then you're able to give back to your family and to your business.
Yeah. I guess some other thoughts. I know since we're getting a little longer, keep learning. Just basically stay humble and realize that you don't know what you don't know. I think you've said it 1,000 times on
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
Building an ownership culture. And not everybody can do that. Like we've done that here in the Carpenter Company. People like their job and you have to set the mood and all that stuff and have the right people. But when they feel like they own it, it's amazing what a team can do.
Mm.
That may be sharing more information, those kind of things, and making them feel like they have a part in the decision.
Absolutely. That's such a big point because you don't literally have to sell your company to your employees for your employees to have ownership in the company. You just don't. Employees have ownership because they're challenged, they're rewarded, and they feel part of the team, part of the family.
Right.
Everybody's pulling together with the same set of oars. And if that culture doesn't exist in your company, you may be a bottleneck.
To get to the next level, sometimes you do have to let go of some things, maybe trusting, but verifying, having checks on things. Believe it or not, sometimes simplifying the process, just having somebody else look at it and simplifying it can go a long way to making it.
Mm. And your perception of a process that can't be simplified is the wrong perception. There's always a way to simplify a process, isn't there?
Break it down into smaller parts. And if talking about the workflow, just take one piece of it at a time.
Talk to your advisors and consultants about what other people are doing in the same situation. Because if you have a complicated problem that you can't simplify, it's absolutely guaranteed that other folks in your line of work have had the same problems and have
Yeah.
figured out a way around it.
That's like the book I wrote with trying to use profit first. If you got a bottleneck in your cash flow, that can bottleneck your cash. And so getting systems like that can streamline your operations and do a lot of things. But again, I guess the whole question of this whole thing is if you disappeared for 30 days, would your business still survive or would it stall out? Would you not have a business anymore? So,
Yeah,
anyway,
it's a good question. And you kind of have to ask yourself that all the time, don't you, Wade?
you know, any closing thoughts?
Not being a perfectionist. Really think about why you're a perfectionist. What's controlling that? And what do you do about it? And be the CEO and not the crew. So you're the chief executive officer, you're the company. If you start acting like you're part of the crew, then maybe you're the bottleneck. The final part of this podcast ought to be your call to action. That's the whole point is, are you called to do something about this? Are these problems continuing to come up over and over again? What kind of advice do I get? Have I even looked into the profit first system and how that might solve some of these problems? There's just a lot of answers out there. And I think this has been a great topic, Wade.
I agree. And again, it's something that I've struggled with myself in building my own firm. And as I've scaled, I guess what I would tell you, the call to action, as a contractor, you may hate the architect because they always
Mhm.
cut your pay apps, but it's your business. You're the architect of your business. And your job is really to draw up those plans and lead the crew, not just swing the hammer. If you're tired of this holding on too tight, never can sleep because you're worried about payroll and can't take a vacation, maybe it's time to think about not just chasing more work, definitely chasing more profitable work, but is it also a scaling problem?
Take a deep breath, relax. It's going to be okay.
You know, so if nothing else, I hope if you listen this far that we've at least made you think about where you are in your business. We appreciate you listening. If you've got any thoughts or comments, we'd love to hear them in the show notes below. And if you enjoyed this, we do this every single week. Please share, subscribe. It always helps us out. And we will see you on the next show. Thanks.